In Oakland, Eric Davis's first World Series at-bat ended with a home run against Dave Stewart. 4 games later, in the same World Series, Davis chased a deep fly ball into the outfield and dove for it. The catch was made, but the play left him with a lacerated kidney that required surgery. A knee operation would follow in the offseason. Within a few days, Eric Davis had experienced both sides of baseball's biggest stage, the rush of announcing himself in October and the physical price of trying to make a championship play. That contrast sits at the center of his career. Davis was one of the most gifted players of his generation, a 5-tool center fielder with home run power, blazing speed, and the range to make people reach for comparisons to Willie Mays. But his career totals never fully resemble the player people saw at his best. To understand why, you have to go back to South Los Angeles, where baseball was not even Eric Davis's first dream. Davis grew up as one of 3 children of Jimmy and Shirley Davis. His father worked for Boys Market in Gardena and stayed active with his sons in sports, including pickup basketball games. At Baldwin Hills Park and Recreation Center, beginning around the age of 12, Eric played against Byron Scott, who would later become a Los Angeles Lakers player. Davis also became friends with another future major leaguer, Derail Strawberry. The two came up in the same Los Angeles baseball world, though they attended rival high schools.
Strawberry played for Crenshaw. Davis starred at John C. Fremont High School in South Los Angeles. Basketball was the bigger part of Davis's life at first. As a high school player, he averaged 29 points and 10 assists per game. He was heavily recruited as a basketball prospect, and he prepared for that future more seriously than he prepared for baseball until his senior year. Then his baseball ability became too large to ignore. As a senior, Davis hit .635 and stole 50 bases in only 15 games. He still had his eyes on the NBA, but he was not interested in attending college, and the usual route to professional basketball at the time ran through the NCAA. Baseball offered a more direct path. The Cincinnati Reds selected him in the 8th round of the 1980 amateur draft, 200th overall. Strawberry went 1st overall to the New York Mets. The draft order placed the 2 friends at opposite ends of the baseball world. One was treated as a franchise-level certainty, while the other was a talented athlete entering the organization with much less public attention. In his first full professional season, Davis stole 40 bases in 62 games. That number gave Cincinnati an early glimpse of what his legs could do, but speed was only one part of the package. Davis had power, bat speed, throwing ability, and the instincts to cover center field in a way that made ordinary plays look almost too easy. He reached the major leagues with the Reds in 1984. His debut came on May 19 against St.
Louis, and it was quiet. 1 at-bat, no hit, no home run, no RBI, no stolen base. The box score offered nothing dramatic. The player himself was another matter. Davis's physical ability was immediate. He could run down balls in the outfield, turn singles into doubles with his speed, and change a game with 1 swing or 1 stolen base. Cincinnati gave him the nickname Eric the Red, and the name fit the way he appeared on the field. Fast, forceful, and impossible to overlook once he was moving. For anyone whose earliest baseball memories came from Los Angeles in the early 1980s, Davis belonged to a very specific kind of sports imagination. This was a city that could make a young athlete dream about the Lakers one day and the major leagues the next. Davis had grown up around basketball talent, shared a draft class with Derail Strawberry, and now found himself turning the same athletic gifts towards center field. The route had changed, but the expectations were beginning to rise. By 1986, those expectations had become production. Davis batted .277, hit 27 home runs, and stole 80 bases. 27 home runs already made him a serious power threat. 80 stolen bases made him one of the fastest players in the game. Together, they placed him in a category occupied by only 2 players in Major League history:
Davis and Rickey Henderson had each reached at least 20 home runs and 80 steals in a season. Even that season does not fully capture the stretch Davis was putting together.
From June 11, 1986 through July 4, 1987, a span covering 162 games, Davis hit .308 with a .406 on-base percentage and a .622 slugging percentage. He hit 47 home runs, scored 149 runs, drove in 123, and stole 98 bases. He was caught stealing only 12 times. For a casual viewer, the simplest way to understand that stretch is to imagine a player who could beat you in nearly every possible direction. He could take a walk, hit the ball over the fence, run out an extra base, steal second, and then cover the deepest part of the outfield. The statistics were not describing separate talents. They were describing one player applying pressure everywhere. Then came 1987, when Davis pushed the combination even further. On opening day, he went 3 for 3 with a home run, a stolen base, and 2 walks. Through the first 10 games, he was batting .526 with 4 home runs and 8 stolen bases. On May 1st, he hit 2 home runs, including a grand slam. 2 days later, he hit 3 more, 1 to left field, 1 to center, and 1 to right. One of those was another grand slam, and he also stole a base. Later that month, he hit 1 more grand slam. 3 grand slams in 1 month had never been done before in the major leagues. Davis was not simply having a good week or collecting highlights in isolation. He was combining the kind of power that could decide an inning with the speed that could disrupt the next one. He finished 1987 with a .293 batting average, 37 home runs, and 50 stolen bases. That made him the first player in Major League history to reach at least 30 home runs and 50 steals in the same season. He did it in 129 games. Before Davis, only 6 players had reached the 30 home run, 30 steal standard. Davis passed that mark and added another 20 stolen bases. The achievement was so unusual that it became its own category, even though the numbers were still only a summary of what watching him actually felt like. The danger was visible, too. On September 4th, Davis was playing at Wrigley Field in Chicago when a deep fly ball sent him toward the outfield wall. Wrigley's brick wall waited beyond the grass, a hard, unyielding edge behind the play. Davis tracked the ball, went back, and crashed into the bricks as he made the catch. For a few moments, he remained on the ground. The ball was secured, but the play did not end when the glove closed around it. Davis was slowed afterward, and the image carried a different kind of meaning. The same center fielder whose speed allowed him to reach balls other players could not get to was also the one absorbing the collision when he arrived. If you remember the way baseball looked in the 1980s, this is the kind of play that stays with you. The deep drive, the center fielder racing back, the sudden meeting between a human body and a brick wall, and the pause before anyone knows whether the catch has cost more than a run. Davis's game was built on that willingness to cover ground and take the extra chance. In Chicago, the physical cost was impossible to miss. He still finished the season with numbers that sounded almost invented. 37 home runs, 50 steals, and a place in baseball history that no one else had occupied before him. The Wrigley collision did not erase the peak. It made the peak more complicated. Davis was becoming the complete player Cincinnati had hoped to find, but the way he played demanded an answer the statistics could not provide. How long could a body keep up with Eric Davis? The answer would take another 3 seasons to emerge. The collision at Wrigley was a warning, but it did not stop Davis from remaining one of the most complete players in the National League. From 1986 through 1990, he averaged approximately 30 home runs and 40 stolen bases per season. He finished among the top 15 in National League MVP voting every year from 1986 through 1990, and from 1986 through 1989, he ranked among the league's top 10 in home runs,
slugging percentage, and OPS. That is the part of Davis's career that can get lost when the conversation moves too quickly to injuries. He was not a one-season sensation. The 1987 season was the loudest expression of his talent, but the surrounding years confirmed that the talent was real, repeatable, and broad enough to influence every part of a game. He made 2 All-Star teams, won 3 Gold Gloves, and earned 2 Silver Sluggers. His value was visible in the outfield, on the bases, and in the middle of a lineup.
He could be the player a pitcher feared, the runner a catcher rushed against, and the center fielder who turned a ball headed toward the gap into an out. In 1989, at Cincinnati's Riverfront Stadium, Davis hit for the cycle. 4 different kinds of hits in one game in the home park where the Reds had watched him become a superstar. That same season, he won the Home Run Derby. For a generation of Cincinnati fans, Davis was becoming part of the city's baseball identity. Riverfront Stadium had its artificial turf, its broad outfield, and the sense that a ball put in play could turn into something more before the defense had time to settle. Davis fit that environment perfectly. A single could become a stolen base. A routine-looking fly could become a sprint toward the wall. A home run could arrive from a player who had already changed the game with his legs. And then, in 1990, the Reds gave him the stage that every young player imagines when the season begins. Cincinnati went wire to wire that year. Davis was a key part of a team that never had to chase its way into first place. The Reds carried that authority into October, facing an Oakland Athletics team that had become one of baseball's dominant powers. The first time Davis came to the plate in the World Series, he faced Dave Stewart. Stewart was one of Oakland's established stars, a powerful right-handed pitcher with the kind of presence that made a World Series at-bat feel larger than the regular season. Davis stepped in for his first chance on that stage. The stadium lights were on. The outfield was cut into the geometry of October, and every pitch carried the weight of a championship that had taken Cincinnati all season to reach. Davis homered off Stewart. That first swing announced that the moment was not too large for him. The home run helped trigger a World Series sweep for the Reds, and the Cincinnati club moved toward a championship with the same confidence it had shown from opening day. But Davis's World Series would not end with the celebration. In Game 4, he dove for a ball in the outfield. The play demanded the same thing his entire game had demanded: speed, commitment, and the willingness to put his body between the ball and the ground. The dive was successful, but the cost was severe. Davis suffered a lacerated kidney and required surgery. The championship was within reach, and Davis had helped Cincinnati reach it. At the same time, his body had been damaged in the act of trying to finish the job. The next images in his story were no longer only home runs, stolen bases, and catches. They included surgery, recovery, and an off-season knee operation for an injury he had suffered earlier in the season. If you were watching baseball in 1990, you may remember how quickly October could change the conversation. One night, a player was part of the celebration and the national broadcast. The next, the focus moved to the hospital, the lineup, and whether he would be able to play again at the same level. For Cincinnati, the sweep was a championship. For Eric Davis, it was also the point where the career he had built began to require constant repair. After 1990, Davis could not get his career back on track. Injuries sabotaged his 1991 season, and the Reds traded him to the Los Angeles Dodgers for Tim Belcher and John Wetteland. The trade itself carried a kind of finality. Davis had spent 8 seasons with Cincinnati, and Eric the Red had become inseparable from the Reds' uniform. Now, the player who had once seemed to embody the organization was starting over in Los Angeles. Several more injuries followed in 1992, and he was largely ineffective. The problem was never simply that Davis had forgotten how to hit or run. The problem was that the game kept asking him to perform at a level his body could no longer reliably provide.
A short stretch with Detroit in 1993 showed what remained. The Dodgers dealt Davis to the Tigers in August, as Detroit looked to improve one of the few weak spots in an otherwise strong offense. Davis replaced Milt Kyler in center field and hit relatively well over 29 games down the stretch. His adjusted OPS was 142, and he recorded his 6th season with at least 20 home runs and 20 stolen bases. That stretch mattered because it interrupted the idea that the old Eric Davis had completely disappeared.
In limited time, the speed and power still surfaced. The player was still in there. What had become difficult was keeping him on the field long enough for those abilities to accumulate into a full season. Detroit expected Davis to be its primary center fielder in 1994. Instead, injuries limited him to 37 games, and he hit 183. After the strike-shortened season, Davis became a free agent and chose to retire. He was 32 years old. For most players, retirement at that age would represent the end of a long, completed career. For Davis, it felt more like the closing of a door that had been forced shut repeatedly. The peak had been historic. The championship had been won. But the final years in Cincinnati, Los Angeles, and Detroit had left him with very little uninterrupted time to find out what the next version of his career might have been. He stayed away from baseball for one season. Then, in 1996, Davis decided he was healthy enough to return. The team was Cincinnati. That return carried more than nostalgia. Davis hit .287 and launched 26 home runs, even though injuries still limited his playing time. He had come back from retirement and produced enough to convince Baltimore to sign him as a free agent. He was also named Comeback Player of the Year. The award recognized the return, but it could not predict what was coming next. In May 1997, Davis was off to an impressive start and had been leading the American League in batting during April. Then his numbers began to slump quickly. Soon afterward, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. The story changed in a way baseball could not control. The outfield walls, the base paths, and the long season were still there, but Davis was now dealing with treatment that left him tired. By September, he returned to the Orioles while still undergoing treatment. A player coming back from an injury is usually measured by the familiar signs: how fast he runs, how hard he throws, whether his timing has returned. Davis had to regain those things while carrying the effects of cancer treatment. The fatigue was documented. So was the work he put into regaining his form. Baltimore was still playing its season, and Davis was back in the uniform. The dugout, the field, the batting cage, and the daily routine of a major league season took on a different meaning, because simply being available required more from him than a normal comeback. Then came the American League Championship Series. In the middle of that postseason, Davis hit a game-winning home run. The source does not need a theatrical reconstruction of the pitch or the inning to show what changed. The home run won the game, and it placed Davis back in one of baseball's highest pressure moments after he had returned from cancer treatment. A few months earlier, his season had been interrupted by a diagnosis that threatened far more than his batting average. Now, his swing had decided a championship series game. After the season, Davis received the Roberto Clemente Award. The honor recognized more than the fact that he had returned to the lineup. It reflected the larger context of a player who had continued working through treatment and who used his position to support others facing cancer. When Orioles great Boog Powell was diagnosed with colon cancer shortly afterward, Davis supported him. Both men underwent surgery by Dr. Keith Lilmo, and they appeared together in public service announcements. Davis's experience had become a source of solidarity, not merely a chapter in his own baseball biography. Then, in 1998, Davis produced one of the best statistical seasons of his career. At age 36, he batted .327, fourth in the American League, and hit 28 home runs. He finished among the league's top 10 in batting average, slugging percentage, on-base percentage, OPS, and offensive wing percentage. He also hit safely in 30 consecutive games, the longest hitting streak in baseball that season,
and a Baltimore Orioles record. Those numbers carry a different force because of what came immediately before them. The .327 was not simply a strong average from a veteran outfielder. It was evidence that Davis had come through injuries, retirement, surgery, and cancer treatment, and had still found another season in which his bat could drive the league's attention. Baltimore in 1998 offered a different version of the Eric Davis experience.
His earlier peak had been built on explosive range and speed, the kind of athletic performance that seemed to happen in an instant. This season carried the weight of endurance. A 30-game hitting streak is not one flash of brilliance. It asks a player to keep answering the next day, then the day after that, across changing pitchers, changing parks, and the accumulated strain of a major league schedule. Anyone who remembers baseball before every game followed you onto a phone may remember the ritual of waiting for the next box score. A hitting streak lived from one newspaper line to the next, from the recap on the evening broadcast to the next day's lineup. Davis's 30-game run made his comeback visible in a way that a medical update never could. The number became a daily record of his return. His 1998 season also complicated the way his career had been described. The injuries had not erased his ability. Cancer had not erased it either. Davis could still produce at an elite level when he was able to play. The difficulty was that the word "when" had become central to his career. Beginning in 1999, injuries again slowed Davis. He spent 3 injury-plagued seasons with St. Louis and San Francisco before retiring for good in 2001. The teams changed, the uniforms changed, and the player's role became more limited, but the pattern remained recognizable. Flashes of the complete athlete, surrounded by missed time and interrupted momentum.
During this period, Davis also wrote his autobiography, Born to Play. In it, he credited Pete Rose with having faith in him and teaching him about the game. He also wrote critically about Ray Knight, with whom he had been involved in a memorable on-field fight in 1986. Davis said Knight did not support his comeback and did not stand up for him in contract negotiations after the 1996 season. Davis remained bitter about the Reds' treatment of him after the 1990 World Series injury. He said that after the hospital released him in Oakland, he was left behind and that the Reds refused his requests for a private plane to bring him back to Cincinnati. He made his own way home. That account belongs to Davis, and it adds another layer to the career's aftermath. The World Series had been the highest point of his time with Cincinnati, but the way he remembered the return from Oakland remained painful. The injury was physical. The sense of how the organization handled it became part of the personal record he carried afterward. Paul O'Neill, one of Davis's former Reds teammates, offered a description that explains why the disappointment around Davis was so intense. O'Neill called him the best hitter, best runner, best outfielder, best everything he had ever seen. That is a remarkable assessment, but it matches the shape of Davis's best years. He was not known for one isolated skill.
His reputation came from the combination: home run power with 80 steal speed, center field defense with the ability to change an inning on the bases, and the kind of athletic range that invited comparisons to Willie Mays. The career ledger is more restrained. Over 17 seasons and 1,626 games, Davis had 1,430 hits, 282 home runs, 934 RBI, and 349 stolen bases. He batted .269, reached base at a .359 clip, and finished with a .482 slugging percentage. In the outfield, he played all 3 positions and finished with a .984 fielding percentage. Those are substantial numbers. They represent a long major league career, a championship, multiple all-star selections, gold gloves, silver sluggers, and years spent among the best players in the league. They also show the problem that follows him through historical comparisons. The players who accumulate the biggest totals usually accumulate them by staying in the lineup for years at a time. Davis lost too much of that time. His career was spread across 17 seasons,
but his body never allowed those seasons to join together cleanly. He finished with 7 20-home run, 20-steal seasons, tied for 4th all-time, one ahead of Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. That number places him among the greatest power speed players baseball has produced. It also provides a more accurate portrait than the raw total of 282 home runs or 349 stolen bases. Davis's signature was not simply how many home runs he hit or how many bases he stole.
It was how often he could threaten both categories in the same season. In 2007, Davis received only 0.6% of the Baseball Writers Association of America Hall of Fame vote. That result reflected the way traditional career accumulation can shape the historical memory. The Hall of Fame vote could count the games he played and the totals he finished with. It could not add back the seasons lost to injuries or measure how unusual his complete game looked when he was healthy. That tension is why Eric Davis remains such a compelling baseball memory. He was not merely a prospect who failed to meet expectations, and he was not simply an injured star whose career ended too soon. He was a player who reached a level few others ever approached, then had to rebuild himself more than once. His influence continued beyond his own playing record. Comedian Ron Sexton made Davis the childhood idol behind his Donnie Baker character on The Bob and Tom Show. Sexton often appeared in character wearing Davis's number 44 Reds jersey and repeatedly described Davis as the most complete player he had ever seen. In real life, Sexton named his first son Eric as a tribute. His foundation, You Before Me, 44, used Davis's number while supporting comedians dealing with mental health struggles and funding baseball scholarships. That kind of tribute is different from a plaque or a line in a record book. It shows what a player can become in the memory of someone who watched him at the right age, in the right uniform, during the right stretch of seasons. Davis's career had a public statistical record, but it also had a personal afterlife in the people who kept the number, the nickname, and the feeling of what he could do. So why do Eric Davis's career totals look so much smaller than the player he was at his peak? Because the peak was real, and it was compressed. From 1986 through 1990, Davis was one of baseball's most visible and complete stars. He reached historic power speed milestones, played Gold Glove defense, finished near the top of the MVP voting 5 years in a row, and helped lead Cincinnati to a World Series championship. After that championship, injuries repeatedly interrupted his career. He retired, returned, survived colon cancer, hit a game-winning home run in the American League Championship Series, and then produced a .327 season with Baltimore in 1998. Even after all of that, injuries shaped his final seasons and ended his playing career in 2001. The opening image in Oakland contains the entire contradiction. Eric Davis stepped into his first World Series at-bat and immediately looked like the player everyone had hoped he would become. Before that series was over, a dive in the outfield had sent him to surgery. The home run was real. The injury was real. The comeback was real. So was the greatness that came between them. Eric Davis did not leave baseball with the largest collection of numbers his talent seemed capable of producing. He left something harder to measure: the memory of a player who could make power, speed, and defense appear in the same instant, and who kept finding his way back to the game after the game had taken him away from himself.